The officer maintained a calm demeanor, his voice steady and measured. He delivered a blow to the face of the 16-year-old boy right before the judge's eyes. Time stood still in the courtroom. The boy remained silent, his eyes betraying no tears. He refrained from raising his voice. He brushed the blood from his lip and turned his gaze to the door, for his father had just entered. And in that instant, everything shifted. How would you respond if someone were to strike your child in the very setting of a courtroom? This father remained calm. He made no threats. He entered the room and in an instant, everything transformed, all without uttering a single word. Share your thoughts below, for there are moments when silence speaks volumes. The atmosphere enveloped you the instant you crossed the threshold into that courtroom. The stillness was more than mere absence of sound. The gaze bore down, heavy with conclusions already drawn. They gazed intently before he had even taken his seat. A 16-year-old black boy, wrists cuffed, entered the room, flanked by 2 deputies. Silence from him reigned supreme. Not a single tear. Not a single tear. Only the soft patter of footsteps on a gleaming surface, which unexpectedly resonated with an overwhelming intensity. A whisper from behind me suggested he must have done something wrong. And in an instant, he became guilty in the eyes of everyone present. Officer Doyle approached the stand with the ease of someone who had navigated this path countless times before. Serene, confident in his own skin, he averted his gaze from the boy. There was no necessity for that. He possessed the badge. He sat with the bench behind him. The breeze whispered behind him. He presented it with effortless grace. He stood firm against it. Spoke out of turn. I had to hold him back as if he were perusing a weather forecast. The judge inclined his head in acknowledgement. Hardly lifted their gaze. The subtle inclination of the head. That was the true statement. The air thickened, a palpable weight settling around you. The boy remained motionless, lost in thought, not rigid, unfazed, as if he had experienced this moment countless times before. His hands lay quietly in his lap. Gaze unwavering, unyielding. He cast a glance at Doyle, and for an instant, a mere flicker, he inclined his head ever so slightly. Then, in a hushed tone, they inquired, "Is this your conception of justice?" Then descended from the stand, just a single step. Next, 2. In that moment, before the judge's gaze, he struck the boy sharply across the face, a sudden and brutal act that echoed in the silence of the courtroom. The shock reverberated through the air, a sharp intake of breath, a muffled gasp. Yet there was stillness all around. Certainly not the bailiff, not the arbiter, only silence. The boy held back his tears. He maintained a calm demeanor. He raised his hand with deliberate slowness, brushed the blood from his lip, and offered a smile. He fixed his gaze on Doyle, unwavering and composed, and declared, "You've just made a mistake. Regret will linger for eternity." It wasn't a thunderous sound, yet it resonated more powerfully than any gavel could in that space. The impact of the slap resonated through the air. Yet the boy, he remained steadfast. He remained unresponsive, defying the expectations of those around him. Not a single tear. Silence, please. A profound silence envelops the surroundings. A presence that stirs unease within the walls of a room. It was as though he understood that this was not the most daunting moment. A recess was called. Whispers floated through the air as bodies stirred restlessly. The judge exited, eyes averted as if the world beyond held no interest for him. Then the court-appointed defense was introduced. Nina Ford, familiar with this building, familiar with the experience of children being thrust into it. She approached silently, the soft click of her heels echoing against the tile, and knelt beside the boy, mindful not to encroach upon his space. "Nina, at your service. I have been requested to act on your behalf. Would you be so kind as to share your name with me?" He cast a sidelong glance, deliberate and unhurried. At last, after a silence that had lingered since his arrival, he found his voice. Names hold no significance. His voice carried no hint of attitude. There is no rebellion, only experience, as if a witness to the way this place devours identities, leaving nothing but echoes behind. Nina observed him intently. He appeared unfazed, not a trace of anger, merely weighty, as if an unseen weight pressed down upon him, invisible to all but himself. Yes, she spoke softly. I would like to know how to address you. A moment of stillness. Then came a breath. Jalen Carter. She inscribed it swiftly. She sifted through her notes. There are no previous offenses. There are no warning signs. Yet that only deepened her intrigue. There was an incongruity about this boy that the paperwork failed to capture. He remained still, did not exhibit defensiveness. His body conveyed no hint of fear. It conveyed authority, the kind that is imparted through instruction. Never brought into existence. It was at that moment she became aware of it. A delicate silver chain nestled just beneath the collar of his shirt. Unassuming, not for display. It was merely an article he kept near to him, as if it were meant to remain hidden from the eyes of others. Nina hadn't intended to glance, yet the glimmer drew her attention as he shifted in his seat. She leaned in just a fraction, her gaze drawn to the delicate engraving. Carter, branch location, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The Federal Bureau of Investigation. Her breath caught in her throat. Silence enveloped her, words unspoken. Not at this moment. She merely cast a glance in his direction. He glimpsed it within her gaze. She was certain she had read it. In silence, he lifted his hand, carefully stowed the chain within the confines of his shirt, and then pivoted, walking away, unconcealed. I've just finished explaining. Whatever you believe that signifies, he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. It does not alter their perception of me within these walls. In that instant, she understood that his intentions were not to secure victory in this case. He was merely attempting to endure it. It is often said that a court recess serves as a moment to pause and regain one's composure. For Jalen, it was merely the subsequent round. The judge had exited the room. Many individuals settled into hushed conversations, fingers dancing over screens, while they savored coffee from disposable cups. Yet the boy remained solitary at the defense table, his wrists still bound in cuffs. At that moment, two officers approached. Not swift, quiet, as if it were a routine they'd perfected over countless repetitions. We're conducting a drug sweep. One of them stated matter-of-factly, Procedure. In the heart of the courtroom, they abruptly tore open his backpack. He rifled through his notebooks, scattered his pens, and unzipped every pocket as if certain that something lay concealed within. He even retrieved a sandwich wrapped in foil, discarding it carelessly as if it were mere refuse. He remained still, observing as they dismantled the fragments of a life that had already been condemned. Nina sprang to her feet with urgency. He is not being detained for possession. Though you possess no justification, they severed her connection. Madam, we are fulfilling our responsibilities. Filing a complaint can be done at a later time. Until next time, forever postponed. That word stood as an impenetrable barrier, erected each time you sought to draw in a breath. One of the officers hastily jotted down a note on a clipboard, ripped the sheet away and let it fall beside the disarray. Report of dubious conduct submitted. Nothing illicit, nothing at all. Yet mark remains. Jalen remained still, offering no resistance. He extended his hand with deliberate slowness, methodically placing each item back into the backpack, as if guided by an instinctual rhythm. At that moment, the second officer, a younger man perhaps in his mid-30s, leaned in toward his partner and whispered just loud enough for all of us to catch his words. Behold him, a prospective inmate rather than a scholar. Though the clock continued its relentless march, the hearts fell silent. Even Nina stood still. Jalen swiftly zipped the bag shut, his gaze fixed downward, as though he were intimately familiar with this moment. Then Doyle re-entered, arms folded, wearing that familiar crooked smile. He flung a crumpled paper onto the judge's bench and declared, "Your Honor, I wish to include resisting arrest and obstruction in the report." The defendant exhibited a lack of cooperation while being transported. Simon scarcely glanced at the paper, refrained from posing a question, and neglected to inquire about the boy. With a subtle adjustment of his glasses, he clicked his pen with a quiet determination. Charges recorded, appended to the docket, just like that. And then he uttered it, with a serene demeanor, almost mechanical, as if he were simply applying catch-up to an already placed order. At times, it is essential to regard them as the individuals they are destined to be. The room remained silent this time, for they were no longer taken aback. Nina's jaw tightened, a wave of nausea washing over her. He was being instructed on the identity he was permitted to assume. When court reconvened, Nina was prepared. She had remained silent during the last break, yet to anyone observing her, it was evident that something had changed. Neither fear nor panic, but rather a steadfast focus. She strode to the heart of the courtroom, a flash drive clutched in her hand, reminiscent of a surgeon wielding a scalpel. There was neither a quiver nor a grand oration. "Your Honor," she began, her voice unwavering, "I have new evidence captured by a civilian security camera at the intersection of Darrow and Fifth." The judge arched an eyebrow, yet remained silent. The account reveals the incident as Officer Doyle recounted it, yet it unfolds a narrative that diverges significantly. With a deliberate motion, she passed the flash drive to the clerk, who then connected it to the court's monitor. The screen flickered to life, and the footage began to unfold. It lacked absolute clarity, yet that was of no consequence. In the grainy footage, Jalen stood poised between Officer Doyle and an elderly black man, whose expression was one of fear and bewilderment. The man, with a cane in hand, progressed at a deliberate pace, his words drifting into the air, muffled yet imbued with a sense of urgency and desperation. Doyle pushed him with force. The man faltered, stumbling backward, and in that moment young Jalen, still just a child, reached out to catch him. He refrained from throwing a punch, held back his voice. He stood resolutely between them, arms outstretched as if to serve as a human shield. That was the moment. In that instant, the air in the room seemed to hold its breath. Several jurors leaned in, captivated by the unfolding narrative. It was evident, almost painfully so. Nina cast her gaze toward the judge. This footage stands in stark contrast to Officer Doyle's sworn statement, revealing that my client took action to avert harm rather than inflict it. For an instant, it seemed as though something had shattered wide open. Perhaps today holds the promise of change. Judge Simons leaned back in his chair, removed his glasses, and wiped them clean. Without lifting his gaze, he declared, "Unverified footage dismissed." Without explanation, without hesitation. In an instant, the truth was relegated to the realm of irrelevance. The sound echoed through the room, a poignant reminder of hope meeting its untimely end upon the cold, hard floor. Neither a gasp nor a cry, only a profound sense of disappointment. It feels akin to witnessing an individual entomb a secret they vowed to safeguard. Nina remained motionless for a brief moment. Yet Doyle, oh, how he smiled, broader than he had throughout the entire morning. "It's never their fault," he remarked, "until the cold metal of handcuffs encircles their wrists." It was at that moment that Jalen raised his gaze. At last, after that fateful slap, he raised his head and uttered a word. Subtle, unassuming, yet profoundly impactful. "Many have sought to conceal the truth, yet I may be the final one to remain hidden beneath its weight." The words fell silent. There was no necessity for them to do so. They have just touched down. And that was the moment it all began. The rustling of seats, the whispers that danced through the air, and the constriction felt in the chest of each individual who had ever witnessed someone like him being suppressed and commanded to remain in their place. People had transcended mere observation. They experienced a wave of emotions. Fury coursed through them. Yet the boy fell silent once more. With hands neatly folded and eyes unwavering, for the first time, the courtroom stood in silence. No judgment cast upon him. It observed him intently. Once the footage was dismissed, Nina returned to her seat, yet she refused to let it slip away. She focused intently on Jalen, attempting to decipher the silence that clung to him as if it were an inseparable part of his being. He showed no signs of anger, stood upright, and didn't even flinch when the judge dismissed the truth as if it were mere dust on a windowsill. Yet, an undeniable change had occurred. One could sense it. Nina inclined her body closer to him, not to exert pressure, but merely to convey her presence, a silent assurance that she remained by his side. At that moment, he gently pushed a folded piece of paper in her direction. There was a distinct absence of eye contact, accompanied by a palpable lack of urgency. With a gentle motion, she unveiled it. A single line, penned with precision. Observe. Refrain from performing. Not at this moment. It was not a request. It was not a question. It was guidance. In that fleeting moment, she found herself uncertain about who was truly defending whom. It was then that she observed the subtle way he adjusted his sleeve, measured and intentional, unveiling the timepiece hidden below. Upon initial observation, all appears ordinary. A simple black band with a metal clasp and a digital display. Yet Nina had encountered it previously. Precisely that model, dispatched by the Bureau to the families of agents engaged in precarious assignments. A single tap could convey a message. A mere 2 taps could unleash a greater flow. She remained silent. I merely cast my gaze upon him. Yet, he averted his gaze. Simply reclined. Serene. Tranquil. As if he possessed an innate awareness of the dwindling moments marked by the clock. In the dim light of the theater, a figure in the back row adjusted his position, the creak of the seat breaking the stillness. Not with a shout, not with anxiety. He occupied a quiet corner, nestled a few rows behind the press box. A dark suit, devoid of a tie, stands straight and poised. His hands rested softly together before him. His gaze remained fixed on Jalen. Never. He would go unnoticed by most. However, should you choose to do so, an immediate realization would dawn upon you. His gaze was not driven by worry. He observed as if anticipating validation. With a quiet yet undeniable presence, Marcus Carter stepped into the narrative. Yet the room remained blissfully unaware. And the boy, he turned away without a glance back. There was no necessity for that. For when silence is a deliberate choice, it resonates more powerfully than any eruption of sound. At times, remaining motionless is the very way you ready yourself to transform it all. It was evident. Doyle believed the courtroom belonged to him once more. He reclined against the rail, a familiar smirk playing on his lips, the kind that arose from the certainty that no one could hinder his path, absent from this place. Not at this moment. Not with that insignia. The video had been discarded. Once more, the truth lies hidden beneath the surface, and the boy remains seated, lost in thought. Yet there remains a profound stillness, still restrained. Thus, Doyle acted in the manner typical of men of his kind when they believe the tale has reached its conclusion. He mocked. "No one is here to rescue you, lad." He refrained from raising his voice. No necessity arose. He spoke with a confidence that suggested he truly held that belief. He held his conviction with such intensity that he didn't even bother to glance around first. And for a fleeting moment, he was indeed correct. Not a soul stirred. Not the arbiter. Certainly not the bailiff. Not the throng, until a chair glided gently across the floor at the farthest corner of the room. The faint sound was almost imperceptible, yet the stillness amplified its presence. A figure emerged, standing resolutely, unhurried, serene. Adorned in a dark suit, no tie is clean, a crisp white shirt. A presence that quietly asserts itself without fanfare, yet it commands the space merely by being. He strolled down the aisle, unhurried, unwavering, as if he were meant to be there, as if he possessed an intimate understanding of the destination that awaited him down this path. Several individuals shifted their gaze. Gazes lingered. Yet the boy remained still, not a single look over the shoulder, for he possessed the knowledge. He had been aware. The man made his way to the front row, halted. Then, they ventured into the expanse that lay between the gallery and the bar, with a voice that was steady yet soft. It was so soft that it compelled everyone to lean closer, he remarked. "I exist." Merely a pair of words. Yet they sliced through the courtroom with the precision of a sharp wind cutting through glass. Doyle's eyelids fluttered momentarily. Rigid, he straightened his shoulders, clinging to the remnants of authority he believed he still possessed. Yet the man was already slipping his hand into the depths of his jacket. With deliberate care, I extracted a leather badge case. He opened it with a swift motion. Gold shimmered beneath the harsh glare of the courtroom lights. Quiet, yet definitive. Marcus Carter, serving as the deputy director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The words struck with the force of thunder, softened by a layer of velvet. Silence, please. Without any theatrics. Simply the truth laid bare. A moment of silence lingered in the air, not within the confines of the sentence, but rather suspended in the atmosphere. An expansive, lingering hush. The room seemed to require a moment to grasp the weight of what it had just encountered. And then, it occurred. One juror shifted, jaw clenched tight. A journalist let her pen slip from her grasp. The court clerk glanced up, a look of bewilderment crossing her face. And the judge, he stood still as stone. Doyle remained silent. His expression spoke volumes. In that instant, the scales shifted. All that he had constructed, the smirks, the power, the comfort, began to unravel. Marcus averted his gaze. Not at this moment. He shifted his gaze slowly and deliberately to Judge Simons, gaze unwavering, shoulders squared away, and then gently, with the authority of law underpinning each word. You have hushed my son. A moment of stillness, not for show, to ensure understanding. Prepare to listen to the echo of responsibility. It was not a threat. It was not merely a performance. It was an undeniable truth, inarguably so. Relentless, Judge Simon remained unflinching, failed to inhale, merely gazed back, a ghostly hue upon their face. Jalen shifted subtly in his seat, still restrained. Remaining firmly rooted, he cast a glance over his shoulder, hardly unexpected, not arrogant, and offered a smile. A mere whisper of a smile graced the lips, a fleeting whisper of tenderness amid the stillness. Then, just above a whisper, he remarked, I told you someone would notice. Silence enveloped the room, as no one dared to utter a word. No one had the courage. For the first time since the boy had stepped into that room, the gaze was no longer fixed upon him. The atmosphere hung heavy, as if the very air was caught in a whirlpool of emotions. Yet Marcus Carter refrained from raising his voice. There was no necessity for him to do so. He advanced with deliberate slowness, every motion intentional. Not as a father imploring, but as a man well-versed in the gravity of law and its application. Your Honor, he said with a composed demeanor, gaze fixed upon Simons, I hereby submit a formal request for a special evidentiary hearing. A moment of silence lingered in the air. One could sense it. Simon cast his gaze downward at the bench, then back to Marcus, striving to maintain his composure. What are the reasons for that? Marcus remained utterly still, his gaze unwavering. Due to prosecutorial misconduct, judicial bias, and the falsification of testimony by Officer Doyle. In an instant, the atmosphere transformed. Nina stood, her voice clear and precise. We respectfully present to the court verified footage for your consideration. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has conducted a thorough review and authentication. It affirms that my client, Jalen Carter, stepped in to avert the use of excessive force against an unarmed civilian. Silence enveloped the room once more as the screen flickered to life. Identical footage, yet now it bears an official stamp, a time code, and the unmistakable watermark of the FBI. Doyle could be seen in the corner of the frame, forcefully pushing the old man. Jalen takes his place, standing guard. It was unmistakable. As the video concluded, Marcus reached for another folder, one that was thicker and heavier in his grasp. He passed it to the clerk. He stated that these are documents pertaining to internal affairs. Over the past 5 years, there have been 3 distinct incidents involving Officer Doyle. Every individual marked for inappropriate behavior. Every single one entombed. He gazed intently at Simons. The 3 cases were all set for a thorough examination by the court. You dismissed all 3 in pretrial hearings. Simon tensed. His hand lingered above the gavel, yet it remained unstruck, was unable to. This place had ceased to be a courtroom. Not quite. A moment of reckoning had arrived. With a decisive movement, Marcus advanced one last step. In a commanding tone, he proclaimed, By order of federal authority, Firm Officer Doyle, you are hereby under arrest for obstruction of justice, abuse of power, and falsifying official records. Inhalations of surprise. A sudden burst of activity. 2 federal agents in suits emerged at the side door, entering the scene like specters summoned by the weight of reality. Doyle attempted to utter a word, his mouth agape, yet silence enveloped him. The cuffs were fastened into place, not swift, not harsh. Only the conclusion remains. Before the gaze of all, before the judge, before the boy he believed to be without strength, Simon remained motionless, his complexion fading to a ghostly hue. He cast a glance at Marcus, then shifted his gaze to Nina and finally settled on Jalen. Yet he remained silent, failed to mount a defense. No apology was given. He merely averted his eyes and remained silent, for there are moments when silence does not equate to strength. At times, it is an act of yielding. As the cuffs snapped into place, a flurry of phones emerged, capturing the scene. Initially subtle, then suddenly overwhelming. The room was alive with the sound of video recordings, reminiscent of rainfall breaking a long drought. In mere moments, the footage had found its way onto the internet. A trembling video captures Officer Doyle in handcuffs, his hands restrained behind him, his complexion ashen and ghostly. The caption proclaimed "Theaster justice for Jalen." It began modestly, with a couple of dozen retweets and a smattering of TikToks. Then it expanded. By midday, it had spread far and wide. The news anchors revived the moment. Comments flooded in during the Facebook Live session. Duets on TikTok. Threads on Twitter. Hashtags piled atop one another. Justice for Jalen. Silence holds power. Timidly, observe as the courtroom descends into silence. The events that unfolded within that courtroom transcended its four walls. It overflowed into living rooms, social media feeds, and dinner tables. Onlookers were not merely spectators. They were etching the moments into their memories. They were acknowledging. Some stood in disbelief, while others were engulfed in pain. Yet, there lingers a feeling that something long awaited is finally making its presence known. Within the gallery, an elderly black woman rose with deliberate grace. Silence enveloped her. She hadn't uttered a word all day. Yet, as the agents escorted Doyle away in handcuffs, she murmured softly to herself. He maintained a calm demeanor, yet his silence resonated more powerfully than the sharpest gavel strike. Indeed, she was correct, for Jalen refrained from raising his voice. He refrained from pleading. He simply bided his time, and when the truth arrived, he greeted it as if he had been anticipating its presence all along. That moment of him smiling just before the arrest transformed into a powerful emblem. A captured moment, a shift in motion. The FBI acted with remarkable speed. An internal review has been announced. Every judicial decision rendered by Judge Simons in the last 5 years will undergo a thorough re-examination. The dominoes began to tumble. Not from a place of fury, but from the profound moment when silence is finally acknowledged. For once, justice resonated quietly, its presence undeniable. As the courthouse doors swung wide, the world held its breath in anticipation. Flashes of light from cameras. Journalists poised with microphones, eager to capture the moment. A cacophony of inquiries erupted, each voice vying for attention, merging into a chaotic symphony of urgency. Yet Jalen remained unhurried. He emerged gradually alongside his father, squinting into the daylight as if it held no unexpected revelations for him. A young female reporter at the forefront raised her voice above the clamor of the crowd. "What held you back from speaking up earlier?" Jalen halted, not in contemplation, but to allow the clamor to recede into the quiet he was about to present. He spoke gently, for when justice advocates on your behalf, there is no need for raised voices. It was not merely a slogan. It was not an act of defiance. It was the sort of response that could only emerge from an individual who has mastered the art of attuning to the gravity of his own stillness and discovered strength within it. Marcus stood beside him, his hands resting at his sides, shoulders squared and tall. He glanced at his son, shedding the roles of deputy director and the weight of title or authority, like a father who had overlooked countless precious moments. Then he uttered a voice, barely above a whisper, yet just audible for Jalen to catch. "Your childhood may have slipped through my fingers, but your courage will not go unnoticed." Jalen remained silent. He offered a single nod, and together they moved forward. There was neither a hand resting on a shoulder nor arms entwined. Two men, a father and his son, stride together, side by side, each step resonating not with the clamor of a press conference or the allure of a headline, but toward a profound and distinct chapter of history. From the shadows, a solitary pair of hands began to applaud. Then another, And soon the sound swelled, not as if from a stadium, but like a wave of respect rising from the sidewalk. Gentle, serene, dignified. They neither waved nor paused, for this moment transcended the throng. It encompassed every boy who had been commanded to remain seated, every father who believed he had lingered too long, every truth that lay hidden beneath layers of uniforms and silence, now liberated and roaming freely. They stifled a boy's voice, yet ignited the spirit of a generation. If this narrative resonated with you, even in the slightest, it may be due to our shared yearning to believe that silence can convey profound truths and that dignity has the power to transform any space. Jalen chose not to engage with the clamor around him. He stood resolutely, a quiet testament that justice does not always announce itself with a thunderous voice. At times it enters with a subtle grace and rises with an imposing presence. If you hold dear the tales that resonate, tales that embody bravery, authenticity, and subtle strength, I invite you to pause for a moment to like this video, share it with someone who could benefit from its message, and subscribe to Mr. Max Stories for more narratives that touch the soul. Your support is invaluable to us. Each perspective, each remark, each act of sharing invigorates our efforts and serves as a poignant reminder of our purpose. At Mr. Max Stories, we go beyond mere storytelling. We craft narratives that linger in the mind, the sort that resonate long after the final credits roll. I appreciate your time and attention. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate your empathy and your companionship on this journey.